I never imagined my own family would attempt to seize the one sanctuary I truly cherished. My parents announced their intention to sell my beach house so my brother could afford a high-end apartment. My mother gazed directly into my eyes and declared, "His child deserves a strong foundation." My father nodded silently, as though my own life and memories were insignificant compared to my brother's new family. Caleb, my younger brother, stood there with a triumphant smirk, cradling his newborn as if victory was already his. What they didn't realize was that I had already reached a decision. I refused to surrender the only place that had ever brought me peace, so I sold it in secret. 2 weeks later, my father approached the front door, his old key in hand, convinced he was about to deliver Caleb the surprise of a lifetime. He turned the lock with a proud smile. But when the door swung open, the person inside wasn't him, wasn't Caleb, and it wasn't me. It was someone my parents never expected to own that house. As a child, the summers I spent at the beach house were the happiest moments of my life. My grandmother had bequeathed it to me when she passed, and even now I can still recall the scent of salt water whenever I close my eyes and reminisce about those mornings on the deck. The house stood at the ocean's edge, its weathered gray siding worn by time. But to me, it was perfect. It was where I learned to fish with my grandfather Oliver, where I listened to his tales of perseverance and dignity, and where I first believed I had value. Growing up, I was always the reserved one in the family. I was reliable, diligent, and rarely caused any trouble. My younger brother, Caleb, was the opposite. His charm drew people to him effortlessly. Teachers adored him, neighbors doted on him, and my parents treated him as if he were the center of their universe. I never resented him for it, but I noticed how Caleb's mistakes were always excused as mere boyish behavior. When I worked 2 jobs in high school to save for college, my parents insisted Caleb needed more of their attention. My role in the family was always to be the steady one, the one who endured disappointment without complaint. The beach house became my escape. I repaired its broken shutters, repainted the porch, and planted flowers along the walkway. Whenever I felt overwhelmed by school or ignored at home, I retreated there and felt whole again. It was the only place that was truly mine, untouched by the favoritism that defined our household. Even my father, Richard, who was often distant, shared genuine moments with me at the beach house. I remember him teaching me how to patch the roof one summer. We worked for hours under the scorching sun, and when we finished, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your grandfather would be proud. You're caring for this place just as he hoped you would." That memory sustained me through years of being overlooked. Then, Caleb became a father. His girlfriend Lydia gave birth to a baby boy, and suddenly everything in our family shifted. My mother, Marissa, grew even more protective. She insisted that the baby's future had to take priority over everything else. I noticed how her tone changed when she spoke about Caleb. He was no longer just the favored son, now he was a father, a man who deserved every advantage they could provide. She would say things like, "A child needs security," or "Caleb carries a heavy responsibility." The unspoken message was clear. My own life and needs could be pushed aside even further. It was during a Sunday dinner that the conversation about my beach house first arose. The table was set with roast chicken and vegetables, the kind of meal my mother always prepared to keep the family united. Caleb sat across from me, gently bouncing his baby while Lydia smiled and watched. My parents looked proud, as if their family had reached a new level of significance now that they had a grandchild. Marissa cleared her throat and said, "Ethan, your brother and Lydia need a proper home. Raising a child in a cramped apartment isn't ideal for anyone. We've been thinking, and we believe it's time to sell the beach house. The money could buy Caleb and his family a luxury apartment in the city. That's what this family needs right now." I felt her words strike me like a blow. I set down my fork and looked at her, waiting for her to laugh or soften her tone, but she was serious. Richard nodded quietly beside her, avoiding my gaze as if his agreement had already been decided before the meal began. I said, "That house was left to me. It's mine." Caleb leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly, and said, "Come on, man. You don't even live there full time. You're single. You've got your own place. My kid needs space. It makes sense." Marissa added, "Your grandmother would want this. She cared about family. And Caleb's child is the future of this family. You'll understand one day when you have children of your own." I looked at Richard, hoping he might defend me. But all he said was, "Your brother has responsibilities now, Ethan. Be reasonable." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the rest of the meal, I barely tasted the food. Caleb talked about how great the new apartment would be, how it was close to the city center, how Lydia would finally have the kitchen she deserved. My parents nodded approvingly. I sat there feeling invisible. It was as if they had already erased me from the equation. That night, I drove to the beach house alone. I walked through the room slowly, touching the walls, recalling the laughter of my grandfather, the aroma of fresh coffee my grandmother used to brew, and the sound of the waves outside my bedroom window. I sat on the porch steps and listened to the ocean crashing against the shore. In that moment, I realized how deeply the betrayal cut. This house wasn't just property to me. It was my anchor, my inheritance, my only proof that I belonged somewhere. I could feel anger boiling inside me, but beneath it was something even heavier: sadness. My family didn't see me as someone worth protecting or valuing. They saw me as a tool to secure Caleb's comfort. They wanted to strip me of the one place where I had ever felt truly alive. That night, as the moonlight illuminated the sand, I knew I was facing a choice that would change everything. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. The conversation from the night before replayed in my mind over and over. I tried to convince myself that maybe my parents were only floating the idea that maybe if I resisted, they would back down. Deep down, though, I knew better. When my mother set her mind on something, she rarely changed course. And when she believed she was protecting Caleb, nothing could stand in her way. A few days later, I stopped by my parents' house. My father was sitting in his chair by the window, reading the paper as always. My mother was in the kitchen cutting fruit. The scent of coffee filled the air. For a moment, it felt like any ordinary morning. But when she looked up at me, her expression told me exactly where the conversation was heading. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "have you given more thought to what we talked about? Caleb and Lydia need that apartment. Their lease is almost up and we can't waste time." I leaned against the doorway and stared at her. "It's not just a house, it's mine. Grandma left it to me because she wanted me to have it. She didn't even flinch. Your grandmother cared about family more than anything. She would want you to put Caleb's son first. Think about the baby, Ethan. He deserves a stable home." My father set down his paper and adjusted his glasses. "Your mother is right. You can't live in the past. Caleb has a family now. You don't." Their words cut deeper than they realized. They weren't just asking me to sell property. They were reminding me of what I didn't have, of how I had never lived up to the ideal son they wanted. I wanted to shout at them, to tell them how unfair it was, but I knew it would be useless. Later that week, I went to visit Caleb. He and Lydia were sitting in their small apartment, toys and baby supplies scattered across the living room. The baby cried in Lydia's arms, and Caleb looked exhausted but proud. He turned to me with a grin. "So did Mom and Dad talk to you about the apartment?" I stayed silent for a moment, trying to hold back the anger building inside me. "Yes, they talked to me. They want me to sell the beach house for you." He leaned back on the couch, rocking his son in his arms. "It makes sense, doesn't it? You don't even use that place the way we could. Lydia needs a bigger kitchen. The baby needs his own room. And honestly, man, it's not like you're starting a family anytime soon. You don't need it." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "It's not about need. That house means something to me. It's not just property." Caleb smirked, his tone turning sharper. "You're being selfish. Mom and Dad said you'd make this difficult, but I didn't think you'd actually fight us on it. Don't you care about my son? Don't you care about this family?" Lydia shifted uncomfortably, trying to soothe the baby. She didn't say much, but I could tell she agreed with Caleb. To them, I was standing in the way of their perfect future. I left that apartment with my blood boiling. The words selfish and don't you care echoed in my head. I had spent my whole life being the one who sacrificed quietly, the one who stepped aside so Caleb could shine. And now they were asking me to give up the one thing that was truly mine. That night, I drove back to the beach house. I walked through the rooms again, touching the chip paint on the walls, running my hand over the banister, breathing in the scent of salt water drifting through the open windows. I sat on the porch where I had sat countless times before, staring at the waves rolling under the moonlight. I thought about my grandfather. I could still hear his voice in my mind from years ago. "Ethan, this house will keep you grounded when the world tries to shake you. Don't let anyone take that away." Tears stung my eyes as I whispered into the night air, "I don't know if I can fight them, Grandpa. I don't know if I'm strong enough." The conflict grew heavier with each passing day. My mother called me again and again, pressing me to make a decision. My father left messages reminding me to do the right thing. Caleb sent texts with listings of apartments as if it was already decided. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about me, about the way my family saw me, about the years I had spent being overlooked and underestimated. They thought I would fold, that I would hand over the keys without a fight. They thought I was still the quiet, obedient son who never said no. But every time I walked through those rooms, every time I heard the ocean outside, I felt the strength of my grandfather's words. The house wasn't just a building. It was proof that I mattered, that someone had believed in me enough to leave me something sacred. The thought of losing it made my chest ache, but the thought of giving in to them was worse. I knew the fight was only beginning, but I also knew this was a battle I couldn't afford to lose. The pressure from my family did not stop. Every day felt like a new wave crashing down on me, pushing me closer to the edge. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from my mother. When I didn't answer, she left messages dripping with disappointment. "Ethan, you're dragging this out. You know this is the right thing to do. Caleb's son deserves better." My father's voice came through quieter, steadier, but no less firm. "Your mother and I have already spoken with an agent. It's time to move forward. You need to sign the papers." Caleb's messages were worse. He sent me links to luxury apartments complete with photos of modern kitchens and skyline views. His text read, "Look at this one. Perfect for the baby. Don't be difficult, or you'll thank me one day when you see how happy my son is." Each word carried a smugness that twisted in my chest. For days, I tried to push back gently. I said, "I'm not ready. The house means too much to me." My mother brushed it off. "You'll adjust. Once the baby has what he needs, you'll see we made the right choice." My father sighed and told me, "Stop holding on to the past. Ethan, it's just a house." Caleb laughed and said, "Don't be dramatic. You'll find another place. We can't waste this opportunity." It was then I realized I was trapped. They weren't listening. They never had. They had already decided what was best, and they expected me to fall in line as I always had. For the first time in my life, I felt a fire burn inside me, hotter than my fear of disappointing them. I thought of the countless times I had stepped aside for Caleb. I thought of the summers, fixing broken shutters with Grandpa Oliver, of the nights I had found comfort in the crash of the waves outside that old wooden porch. I thought of the promise. I whispered to myself, I would never let anyone strip away the one place that truly belonged to me. That was when the decision became clear. If they wanted to use my house as a bargaining chip for Caleb's future, then I would take that power away. I would sell it myself, not to give them the money, but to make sure it was out of their reach forever. The plan formed quietly. I called a realtor I trusted, a woman named Karine, who had helped me once before when I considered renting the house out during off-seasons. When she answered, her voice was warm but cautious. "Ethan, it's been a while. What can I do for you?" I swallowed hard. I want to sell the beach house, and I need it done quickly, quietly, before anyone else tries to get involved. There was a pause on the line. "Are you sure? That place has been in your family for years. Are you certain you won't regret this?" "I'm sure," I said. My voice shook, but my resolve didn't. It's better gone than stolen from me. Within days, Karen had found a buyer. The demand for oceanfront property was high, and the house, though weathered, carried the kind of charm people wanted. The speed of it all left me breathless. I signed the paperwork in her office, my hand trembling as I scrawled my name across the contract. A part of me felt like I was betraying the house itself, betraying the memories that lived inside it, but another part of me, a stronger part, felt relief. I was taking control in a way I never had before. The day I handed over the keys, I stood in the living room for a long time. Sunlight poured in through the windows, casting golden streaks across the floorboards. I ran my fingers over the doorframe where my grandfather once measured my height with a pencil. I walked down to the beach and stood barefoot in the sand, letting the cold water wash over my ankles. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. When I left, I locked the door and slipped the key into my pocket one last time. I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa. I hope I'm doing right by you." Then I dropped the key onto the realtor's desk and walked away. 2 days later, my mother called again. Her voice was sharp with impatience. "Ethan, the realtor we spoke with says you've already sold the house. Tell me that isn't true." I hesitated, my heart racing. "It's true." The silence on the other end was heavy. Finally, she hissed, "How could you? Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" "It's my house," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "It was never yours to give away. You never asked what it meant to me, and you never cared. So I made the choice myself." Her anger spilled through the phone. "You've ruined Caleb's chance. You've betrayed your own brother. You've betrayed us." I ended the call without responding. My hands shook, but my chest felt lighter than it had in months. I had stood my ground. For once, I had chosen myself over their expectations. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the blank walls. Part of me feared what would come next, the storm of resentment I knew my family would bring. But a stronger part of me felt something I had never experienced before: freedom. 2 weeks passed after I sold the beach house. In that time, the silence from my parents was deafening. My mother stopped calling altogether. My father's voice disappeared from my voicemail. And Caleb only sent one text: "You'll regret this." I tried to convince myself that maybe things would cool down, that eventually they would understand I had done what I needed to do. But deep down, I knew my family had not accepted the finality of it. One Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a message from a neighbor near the beach. It read, "Your dad is here with Caleb. Looks like they're about to go into the house." My stomach tightened. I hadn't told them who the new owner was. I hadn't explained that I had no intention of letting them back inside. Part of me wanted to drive down and stop them, but something in me held back. I stayed where I was, waiting, bracing for what I knew was coming. Later that day, my father called. His voice shook with fury. "Ethan, what have you done? Who is Mason Carter, and why is he standing in your house?" The story unfolded in pieces. My father had taken Caleb to the beach house, holding his old key like a prized possession. He had imagined the moment when Caleb would step inside, see the sunlight flooding the living room, and believe his future was secure. My father turned the lock, smiling proudly, only to find the door swinging open to reveal Mason Carter, my childhood best friend. Mason had grown up with me in that very neighborhood. He had eaten dinner at my grandmother's table, swum with me in the ocean, and listened to Grandpa Oliver's stories about the importance of holding on to what mattered. When the opportunity came to sell the house, I called Mason first. He had always loved it as much as I did, and I trusted him to protect it. When my father and Caleb walked in, Mason stood calmly in the doorway. "Can I help you?" he asked. "This is my son's house," my father said firmly, holding up the old key. "We're here to show him his future." Mason shook his head. "I'm sorry, but this is my house now. Ethan sold it to me." Caleb's face turned red with rage. He shoved past my father, pointing at Mason. "You're lying. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't stab his own family in the back like that." Mason's expression didn't waver. He did it because he had no choice. Because none of you listened to him. He asked me to keep this place safe, and I intend to do exactly that. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of waves outside the windows. My father dropped the key onto the counter, his hand trembling. Caleb turned to him in disbelief. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me Ethan didn't just take everything from me." When my father called me that night, his voice cracked. "Why, Mason? Why would you do this to your own brother?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Because you never heard me. You only ever heard Caleb. You treated me like my life didn't matter. Like I was only here to make his easier. That house wasn't for sale. It was mine. And if you wouldn't let me keep it, then I had to make sure you could never take it." He was silent for a long time before whispering, "Your mother is furious. Caleb is devastated. I don't even know what to say to you." I closed my eyes and pictured my grandfather's face. "Then don't say anything. Just know that for the first time in my life, I chose myself. I won't apologize for that." The fallout spread quickly. Marissa called me the next day, her tone sharp and bitter. "You embarrassed this family. You humiliated us in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what Caleb is going through? Do you have any idea what you've done to your nephew's future?" Her words cut deep, but I didn't back down. I know exactly what I did. I protected the only part of myself you ever tried to take. Caleb can build his own future without destroying mine. She hung up without another word. That evening, I met Mason at the beach house. We sat on the porch together, watching the sun dip into the horizon. He handed me a beer and said, "You know they're never going to forgive you." I nodded. "I know, but I couldn't keep living as if my life didn't matter. I had to make a stand." He smiled faintly. "Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said that house would test you one day." Hearing that brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. The fight had cost me dearly. It strained every relationship I had with my parents and brother. But in that moment, watching the waves crash against the shore, I felt stronger than I ever had before. The climax had come not just in the reveal of Mason standing inside that house, but in the realization that I had finally broken free from the role they had forced me into my entire life. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the quiet son who always gave in. I was Ethan Hayes, and I had taken my life back. In the weeks after the confrontation at the beach house, the silence from my family grew heavier than any argument. My mother stopped inviting me to dinners. My father avoided calling, and when he did, his words were clipped, spoken with the weight of disappointment. Caleb barely looked at me the few times we crossed paths. The divide was sharp and cold, and it was clear they all blamed me. Marissa was the loudest in her disapproval. One night, she called me, her voice trembling with anger. "You destroyed this family's unity, Ethan. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Caleb's friends, Lydia's parents, even the neighbors know what happened. How could you be so cruel?" I wanted to defend myself, to explain again why I had acted the way I did, but I realized it would never matter. To her, I was selfish. To her, I was the son who had turned his back on his own blood. No amount of explaining would change the story she carried in her heart. So I listened, and when she finished, I said only, "I did what I had to do." Then I hung up, knowing she would never forgive me. My father was different. He carried his disappointment quietly. One evening, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked older than I remembered, his shoulders heavy, his eyes tired. He didn't sit right away. He walked around the small space, his hands behind his back as though searching for words. Finally, he said, "I should have seen it. I should have remembered what that house meant to you. When I watched you fix the roof with your grandfather, when I saw the way you cared for that place, I should have known. Instead, I let your mother's voice guide me. I let Caleb's needs overshadow yours. For that, I'm sorry." The words caught me off guard. My father had never apologized to me before. For a moment, I felt the child in me wanting to accept it completely, to believe it fixed everything, but the scars ran deeper than one apology could heal. Still, hearing him say it mattered. I nodded and replied, "I needed you to see me, Dad, not just as Caleb's brother, but as your son too. I needed you to stand with me, and you didn't." His eyes fell and he said quietly, "I know, and that will stay with me." We sat together for a while after that, neither of us speaking much. The silence filled with everything we both wanted to say but couldn't. When he left, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief sadness because I knew things would never return to what they once were, relief because at least one truth had been spoken aloud. Caleb, on the other hand, had no interest in reconciliation. When we finally met again at a family gathering months later, he pulled me aside, his voice low, but sharp. "You took everything from me. My son could have had the perfect start, and you ripped it away. Don't think I'll ever forget that." I looked at him, my younger brother, the boy who had always been the center of our parents' world. "I didn't take anything from your son. You and Lydia will build a life for him yourselves. That's what being a parent means. I only stopped you from stealing mine." His eyes burned with resentment, and I knew then that our relationship might never recover. Maybe it was already gone. The aftermath of my choice was not easy. There were nights I lay awake questioning myself, wondering if I had been too harsh, if I had let anger drive me more than reason. But every time I remembered walking through that house for the last time, I felt certain I had done what was right. If I had given in, I would have lost more than a house. I would have lost the last piece of myself I had left. Mason kept his promise. He took care of the house, restored it with respect, and sent me updates now and then. Sometimes he invited me over, and we sat on the porch like we had as kids, watching the waves crash against the shore. One evening he said, "You know, you could have kept it if you wanted, but I understand why you couldn't let them take it from you. You didn't sell the house, Ethan. You saved it." Those words stayed with me. I hadn't destroyed the house. I had preserved it in the only way I could. Looking back, the lesson was clear. Family isn't always about blind sacrifice. Sometimes it's about setting boundaries, even when it hurts. Sometimes it's about protecting the pieces of yourself that no one else values, because if you don't, no one will. My mother still sees me as selfish. Caleb still sees me as a traitor. My father carries regret he cannot undo. But for the first time in my life, I see myself as someone who stood his ground, someone who mattered enough to fight for something he loved. The beach house no longer belongs to me, but it still holds my story. It still carries the weight of every memory, every lesson, every moment that shaped me. And as I sit by the ocean today, watching the horizon glow with the fading sun, I realize I didn't lose the house. I found my voice. That day at the beach house changed everything. My family may never see me the same way again, but I finally saw myself clearly. I learned that protecting your peace sometimes means standing alone, and that's a choice worth making. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, let me know. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below about a time you had to stand up for yourself. I'd love to hear your stories too. And if you want more true stories filled with twists, lessons, and raw emotion, make sure you subscribe. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more stories just like this.